Caroline, are you ready for a little bit of risky business?
Whoa. I want you to like superimpose like the sunglasses from Risky Business on me.
I want you to superimpose me sliding in the background in just the button-down shirt.
Please do that.
Also, if I wore a button-down shirt, it would like, it wouldn't cover my undies. You'd see clear undies.
You don't think so?
No.
It's oversized. Everything was oversized in the 80s.
I'm oversized.
That's a good point. Great point.
All right. So in this episode, we talk to you about all the risky things we've done in our lives, mostly business-related stuff.
Yeah,
but there is
like,
there's a big life business story in there.
Yeah, risky things we've done in our lives sounds like doing drugs and stuff. It's not about
Yeah, we talk about our experience with black tar heroin. I still don't know what that is.
It's all the times that each of us have taken a big leap or done something kind of scary in terms of a big life change. So
there's a lot of quitting. We talked about a lot of quitting in this
quitting
episode.
Jobs, quitting places.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who's considering a big change, or maybe it's just a little whisper right now, but maybe it is going to get louder for you over the years, this is going to be a really good episode for you to listen to, and we share some helpful tips on how to take a big risk in your own life.
We hope you enjoy it. So enjoy
Let's get into it.
Hey there, we're Jason and Caroline Zook, a husband and wife team who believes life is just one big experiment.
This is the show where we share our journey as we figure out this ever-changing thing called life. We cover topics like running a business, traveling the world, and clawing our way out of debt, all with the hope of inspiring you to live, work, and create with more intention.
Life might bring its twists and turns, but when you know who you are and what you want, you're never really lost. Welcome to Wandering Aimfully, the show. For those of you who are watching at home, you're on YouTube. Hello.
Hello.
For those of you who are listening in your car or on the treadmill or wherever you are.
Hello.
Hello. We hope this episode helps you look at a risk that you are thinking about taking in your life, something that is sitting in front of you that seems scary and daunting and like it cannot be done. And hopefully we're like your risk Sherpas, you know, like you're looking at your little risk Mount Everest, and then you've got us carrying all of your mental baggage because you have so much, and we're going to just usher you up the mountain.
That's what we're going to do.
To the top is where you
want to go?
Achieve your risk.
I'm thinking also for the people out there who maybe they aren't at this very moment confronted with some sort of big change, but maybe it's just like a little whisper. It's just like a little thought in the back of their head that's like, you know, what if? Like, what if I moved to Europe? What if I quit my job? What if I...
It's a big whisper.
Well, it's just sort of like a nagging little like daydream. You know what I mean? And so for those people also, I think this episode could be fun because I think it could start to get those wheels turning a little bit more and turn that whisper into a regular sounding voice.
Just kind of waited to see what would happen there. All right. So do you want me to start off? I wrote down a list of our different risks we've taken over the years, and I can start off with mine. So if we rewind the clock back to college, Jason, he is...
You have to say it like that.
College Jason. He's just smashing natty lights. That's all he's doing. Wearing tank tops and being a bro.
Being so bro.
God, he was such a bro. I had a job, a part-time job at the ATP, which is men's professional tennis. It's like the NBA of basketball. The ATP is the governing body of tennis.
Which I did not know existed when
no
we
one,
first
no
met.
one really knows. No one really knows. It's just not as popular. It's kind of funny that tennis as a sport is very popular, but the like governing body has almost no brand recognition, at least here in the States.
That is interesting.
I think in Europe it definitely has brand recognition because a lot of the events are named ATP Tour level event, etc. So anywho,
fun aside.
so this is 2003, I think, or 2004. I got a part-time job with the ATP. I actually found the job, I think, online, and I had just recently been fired from my paid internship where I was photoshopping cellophane off of little gift baskets that were on an internet coffee company's website.
It so much.
That was the worst. I was so mad.
You were photoshopping the cellophane off of the basket?
No, I was photoshopping like the glare on the cellophane, so it didn't look as bad. Oh yeah, I can. Like,
you were retouching. Gift baskets.
Yeah.
That was your job.
That was me in 2002. That's
You're part of the problem, man.
Man,
You You are manufacturing reality.
Oh no.
Wow. Hashtag no Photoshop.
I started
Am I
everything.
right?
Yes, Kendrick. I apologize. I started this entire thing. Anyway, so I was looking for a job because I pretty much had a part-time job the entire time I was in college. I worked at Athlete's Foot. I worked at this cellophane photoshopping job. And then
Factory.
That's all I did was just
I picture
sat in a
you
row.
and about 200 other poorly paid people sitting at desks just photoshopping.
Yeah, that was it. So I applied for this job. I met a guy who was a French Canadian who, spoiler alert, ended up being my boss, and took this job and had no clue. I didn't know. In the interview, he was like, "Can you name 5 tennis players right now, like currently ranked tennis players?" And so I turned it back on him. I was like, "Can you name top 5 NBA players?" And he was like, "Touche, I cannot." And I was like, "Okay, I think we'll be fine."
Yeah, but that guy was not interviewing for a job for you.
No, but it was
the NBA.
And my point was that I wasn't interviewing for a job to know tennis players. I was interviewing for a job to do graphic design for a company. So I didn't need to know the tennis
it worked.
players.
So
Did work. I think he liked my spunk at the time. So anyway,
you certainly do have
it had nothing to do with getting this job. It actually had to do with quitting this job. So I worked at this job for 3.5 years, very comfortable job. I worked my way up, I think, from $35,000 a year to $55,000 a year when I quit.
In how many years?
In 3.5 years, which
good.
in the corporate world, I mean,
yeah.
it's a pretty solid jump.
Yeah.
And it was a great job. I mean, I literally worked 3 minutes from my house.
You got a nice grande mocha every day from
Oh
Starbucks.
man, we talked about this. Every time we drive by a Starbucks, I think back to pretty much every single day of my life. I would go into the Starbucks because I don't even think drive-through Starbucks was a thing in 2003 or 4. I would walk in, I would order my grande mocha, extra whip, with a coffee cake.
We're going to up your life insurance policy. This is bad. Bad news.
And in the first 27 minutes of my day, I consumed 1,200 calories.
Dear goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
If they put something addictive in that
Oh,
stuff.
absolutely.
Because I went through a hazelnut latte phase where I was just coming back like a addict.
Yeah. Now,
like,
luckily, I was like 22 at the time,
Yeah.
so my metabolism was just like, I'll take this and I'll work with it.
We're gonna hope so.
Yeah. Anywho,
Great
so
job.
I'm at this job. I've been working there. I've been traveling with the company. I went to different events and went to New York City and got to sit in the box at the U.S. Open and just got to do a bunch of really cool things. And there were really great people that worked there. And actually, it was kind of the first place I had been introduced to people from different cultures. I ended up having 2 roommates who worked there, one from Brazil and one Italian guy.
Cool.
And so that was just really fun. Again, just all this different exposure. And I got to work on my skill set and all this stuff. Anyway, but I found myself every day, and I call this my beige existence at the time, was like beige desk, beige chair, beige monitor, beige desktop tower, beige walls, beige paint on the walls. It was just a beige existence.
You guys know those offices, and maybe some of you work at them right now, where you just walk in and everything is just so vanilla.
Yeah.
And I feel like even just that external representation of that seeps into your consciousness.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
for
Where
sure.
you just feel like this is the opposite of feeling alive and vibrant, I would say.
Especially when you're doing creative work. I'm
Right.
supposed to be creating visual, interesting things. And at the time, I was actually doing a lot of Flash animation, which is kind of funny. That'll
Look
set
at you.
the fellow designers back.
Yeah, no, quick aside, I remember working for the agency in Jacksonville, and they put the creatives in the bottom floor of the agency, which
Yeah.
was technically the basement.
Yeah.
We had one little skylight, which I just sat under basically every day. Nobody else moved from their desk, and I was coming from this more creative agency. So I was like, we used to sit wherever we want, so I'll sit there. But it just was the funniest thing to me, where it was you're going to put the most creative people in the place with the least amount of natural light. That makes no sense.
You put them in the dark.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm working at this job. I have a friend who I meet up. We get burgers and fries every Thursday just to chat and hang out. We were both in the
adding
cars
to
as
the
well. Oh, yeah.
Starbucks.
Yeah, there's a real trend here in my 20s of not healthy eating. That's for a whole other episode of the show. But I just had this inkling that it wasn't for me. This beige existence was not working for him. It was the same thing. He was working at a great agency, but just felt the same way. And so we decided we were going to go out on our own. But it's a huge risk at the time. I mean, I'm making a good salary. I have no commute. I couldn't complain about anything at all except for the beigeness. And I remember driving to and from work and then driving to other places and just thinking can I do this? Can I quit this job? Can I start my own business? Who am I to start my own business? How will I get clients? Am I going to make no money at all? There was just so many uncertain things.
How long would you say that time period went on, where you were
just thinking about
from
it?
the idea,
So in whisper phase.
whisper to moderate, normal, voice.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny if you think about who I am today, for those of you that know, and for you, I don't stay in whisper phase very long.
No, doesn't exist.
No, I'm very impulsive these days. But back then, I mean, I think I probably was in whisper phase for like 3 months, and I would just constantly be thinking about
just sort of daydreaming about it, seeing, like,
and also
what it
just
would feel
trying to
like.
weigh all the things of. And I think what it finally, like, the thing that really moved me from whisper stage to making a big change and taking a risk and quitting this job was, I was like, I'm single. I have no dependents other than my dog Plaxico. And what's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
Like, literally, I had this conversation with my boss too at the time. He was such a cool guy, and I was like, "This just isn't for me." He's like, "Well, just if you find something else, cool, but in the meantime, just keep doing your job." And I just
That's pretty
remember,
cool.
yeah, I just remember him saying, like, "If you're going to do it, like, you don't have kids," and he kind of reiterated that, and I was like, "Yeah, this is the time that I should do that." And he was like, and he was like, "Truthfully, like, if you want to come back, like, I'll just rehire you."
That is,
It's very rare.
that's an interesting point that I want to spend a little time on, because do you think that is a scenario afforded? Like, okay, what I'm thinking in my head is that feels very different than the experience that I had as a female, which was nobody's going to understand. I'm letting everybody down. When the whisper phase was hit me of like, I might want to quit my job and I might want to go do my own thing or do something different. All the thoughts in my head were not like, my boss is going to be support me in this. It was I'm letting everyone down. Like, this is not okay. I have responsibilities. Like, some of that I'm sure is my own like projection of that, but some of that I just can't even imagine a superior coming to me and being like, yeah, like, you have a job waiting for you. And maybe that's not a male-female thing. Maybe that's a dependent upon the scenario thing.
Yeah.
Do you think he was just like a nice guy?
Oh, no, he was 100%
Just
a
a really
fantastic
good
guy.
guy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from day one, that first interview, just like we hit it off. He was so friendly and
The
so
reason
nice.
I bring that up is because maybe somebody out there right now is listening to that, especially being a female like myself, and going, oh, those things are actually just in my head.
Yeah.
Like, nobody has come out and said to me, you would be letting everyone down, or don't leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting thing to
I
have
think we
awareness of.
also live now 15 years later after that. We live in a different work economy where I think a lot of bosses know if you're in a decent job that there's a twinkle in the back of every great
True.
worker's mind of like, I could go out on my own and do my own thing. Like, it's very available to me
Yeah.
now. And so I think that honest conversation could probably happen.
Yeah.
And so here's exactly what I did. So after I got through the whisper phase and after I decided I was going to do this, I essentially sat down with my boss. Well, I first sat down with myself and I went, what do I need to feel comfortable making this change? Because I'm not just going to quit tomorrow and jump in. So what I talked about with my co-founder, was I wanted to have 6 months of personal runway saved up. And so this is actually the first time in my life when I looked at all my expenses in some way. I didn't look at them very closely because I didn't have that much fortitude.
Natty
Natural light budget,
Burger
$12
King.
a week. No,
Starbucks.
I was outside of Burger King at this point. I was
okay.
Cruisers Burgers, which
Cruisers.
you know. Yeah.
Oh, God, what I wouldn't give for a veggie burger at
Yeah,
Cruisers
greasy.
right
But anyway, I looked at this stuff and I basically told myself, I can live. I was living rent free. My mom had a condo I was living in, so I had like all these advantages, which I'm very, very well aware of in this first risk that I took. But I could live off of basically $1,500 a month. And so what I decided to do was save up. And that was just cutting back my expenses. And I basically saved up that money very quickly because I had already had a little bit of savings. I was kind of smart. I wasn't investing any of it, but I had a little bit. And so it took me, I think, like 3 months to save up that buffer that I wanted to have 6 months. And I sat down with my boss once I got close to that, and I kind of gave him a heads up. And I said, hey, I'm making this decision. I am going to go with this. I'm really excited. I'm really nervous, but I'm just giving you more of a heads up than 2 weeks notice.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's great. Like, we're happy to support you and whatever you do. Like, excited to see you move on. Like, you've been here for 3.5 years. Like, you know.
Did you have any, any fear or like pit of your stomach feeling about quitting?
Oh, every day. I mean, and I think that's why talking to him was really helpful, my boss at the time, because it gave me someone that could basically tell me like, you're talented, you're good, like you're going to figure this out, like you're a go-getter, like we hired you almost on the spot for a reason, like we saw a lot of potential in you.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, they may get that from some source in their life, and that can be a really helpful thing when you're at that pivotal moment. But I do remember both the day that I sat down and gave my 2 weeks notice, and then when I first started kind of working for myself. Now, I will also say in this time, we had started the company. So I didn't just jump ship and then start from zero. We had also, I think for like 3 months before this, started taking on 1 or 2 clients. I mean, it was really one, I think, ahead of time, and it was no money at all, really. But we just kept working. We kept working in late hours of the night. We kept, carving out this time, meeting up multiple times now, more, a lot of burgers. And got to this point, and then it became, as soon as that security blanket was lifted of the salary that I had and this cushy job that I could go and sit at, it was like, like now I have to do it all.
Yeah.
But at the same time that I had the pits in my stomach of like, what if we don't get any clients? Like, I don't know anybody. I'm just kind of like, just trying to figure this out. There's no Twitter, there's no Facebook, you have no immediate access to a lot of people at this time. It was really just me going, I believe we can do this. I know how talented we are. And worst case scenario, I can either go back to my job or if they won't take me back, I can get a job at Starbucks and hopefully make more than I consume every day.
Right.
That was my goal.
Just make enough
to eat the coffee cake and the mocha.
No, I was just thinking though, it's so interesting. I wish, because I had a little bit of a similar experience where I was so nervous to like quit, but the 2 times that I quit jobs, that the person sitting across from me, like my boss or superior, basically like sat me down and told me, you're such a great worker. Like we didn't think we were going to hold on to you for this long. Like basically said like they expected this and whatever. And I'm like, why is it that it takes employers for someone quitting in order to make them feel valued and make them feel, like their skills are being recognized? Like not as much on the second one, but definitely in my first job, if I would have felt more encouraged and more validated in my skill set, especially like young people who are in the workforce for the first time, I would have stuck around longer. But it was like, I just feel like I'm not doing enough all the time.
Yeah. What's funny is I had all that. I had the encouragement. I had the empowerment. It's like,
and you took that and you said, great, I can start my thing.
I mean, I remember because I had
it's a double-edged sword.
I had a new boss at the end of it, but it was like, I almost had 2 bosses in some respects, but like the head of the department was the new guy.
Yeah.
And I remember going in to put in my 2 weeks notice and he was like, well, what's your number? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'd never really experienced that. Like, I'd heard of it. And it was like, what kind of salary do you need? And I was like, well, it's actually the first time in my life where I was like, it's not about the money. Like, I think maybe if they would have doubled my money, maybe I would have stayed, but I knew that wasn't a possibility. And so, I made that leap and from there, it was just the battle every day of just going, what can I do to make this business happen, to get design clients, to do the best job that we can, go above and beyond for every single client we have, because we only have like 3 of them at this time. And then really the riskiest part of that then became not getting comfortable and just going like, I'm the controller of my own destiny at this point. I need to do everything that I can and still enjoy life, but really be focused on what I'm doing.
I think a big part of it is recognizing that realization can be both terrifying but also super empowering. And the more that you can lean into the empowering part of it, so it's like you can say to yourself, okay, I'm solely responsible for my income now, and that can be crushing to you. Or you can say, I'm solely responsible for my income now. Great, it's all within my hands. Like, that's really empowering. I get to choose to wake up every morning and, make a change and stuff. I think we had talked about even in my first year of Made Vibrant, which was my business, which I'm jumping around my own timeline here a little bit. But in the first year of owning my own business, I went from year 1 making about $30,000 revenue to year 2 making $100,000 revenue. And you and I used to talk about all the time, in what other way can you triple your income? Like, you can't work for somebody else and they're going to say, why don't we triple your salary, for your promotion? And so there's something really, really empowering about that, which says if you work hard and if you make the right choices, then the sky's the limit for you. Another important thing that I wanted to point out from your story that I think is helpful for people is the notion of like these like stepping stones. So people ask me all the time, how do you take a big risk? How do you quit your job, or how do you make a big move? And I always tell them, don't make it as that big. You know what I mean? Like, dip your toe in the water as much as you possibly can while you are in that place of now. So like the security of a job or where you're living right now. Find ways that you can test drive whatever this big risk is that you want to take, so that you actually know, oh, I like this. Or so you can actually get some clients under your belt, or you can kind of stuff the tip jar, if you will, kind of get yourself going, get yourself started. And, the same way that you would, if you were at a job that you hated, but you wanted to move jobs, you would put out feelers. You would try to line up interviews before you quit your job.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you kind of have to approach other big risks like that as well.
So yeah, just to wrap up that first quitting story for me, quit that job. The first 6 months didn't need to dip into my savings at all. We had secured a couple of clients. The best thing we did was do amazing work, give amazing customer service, and simply ask our clients if they knew anybody else who needed work. And that's how we built our business from 0 to $250,000 in revenue in the first year and a half.
It's awesome.
It was just through a couple people that we knew, asking if they knew anybody, doing really great work, and then them recommending us. And then them coming back with other projects was really helpful.
Do you remember how much you were charging for projects at the time, out of curiosity?
I remember when we first started, we were trying to charge $100 an hour, but we started with, I think, $80 an hour. And then eventually by the end of it, we were somewhere around like $250, $300 an hour. Which, I mean, I don't even know if that's high or not. Like, I don't, but we kind of took the approach that I think a lot of freelancers, good freelancers do by the end of it. And this just happened naturally, was we stopped charging by the hour and started charging by the project. And just basically said like, hey, we don't want to nickel and dime you. We hate tracking hours. It's not fun for us. It takes time. We have to bill you for that time. We just believe with our experience, this project can take this much amount. And the first time that we did that, it was scary. I mean, it was its own little risk in itself. But it just made it more comfortable for us to go, okay, this project is going to cost $15,000. We know that there are enough hours in there. We've built something similar. We have a good idea for it. So.
We could do an entire episode just on like the
pricing
and like the fear of that. And because I remember that was so tough for me when I was back in my design days.
Yeah.
I hemmed and hawed over
and I just kept being like,
so much.
Double it, add a zero.
I know.
Yeah.
Which is like so much easier said than done. But
okay, let's talk about, so that's my first big risk, was
Big risk.
quitting the ATP, going to my first entrepreneurial endeavor. Let's talk about your first endeavor, which ironically enough is also quitting a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, a lot of quitting. We discovered.
This family quits a lot.
I'm pro quitting.
Yeah,
actually.
for sure.
Pro quitting things that don't serve you anymore. Yeah, I would say my first big one was definitely my first job out of college. So I was an advertising major, as you know, and I guess in my advertising kind of program, the big thing that you were trying to achieve was like a job in New York on Madison Avenue, that type of Mad Men thing. And I did an internship at this like crazy big advertising agency in New York right before my senior year. And I hated it. I hated living in New York. I wanted to like it. Like I wanted to have this romanticized idea of myself of like big city girl hustling and bustling. And this is like the first important key is I think to separate the difference between what you want to be and who you actually are. And so I was like, I know I want to be this thing, but I don't think I'm this thing. And so I was trying to seek out ways for me to have that big advertising successful thing without living in a big city. So I found this great agency in Durham, North Carolina. They were independent, so they weren't like as big as something like, I mean, these won't make any sense, but like an Ogilvy or a BBDO, but they had some people might, but they had big clients. So, and they worked in this super cool, like edgy brick building and old, like refurbished tobacco warehouse or whatever. And it just was like this dream of this creative agency. But the second I got there, as a lot of jobs, especially first jobs are, the reality did not match what I thought in my head. Number one, I wanted to work at this agency so badly that I had chosen to work in the media department because it was the one position they had open when I was graduating. I am much more of a creative, and I now know, or an account planner, like a strategy, something that was better suited for my skill set rather than just being sort of a number cruncher and managing sales reps and stuff. So I pretty quickly found that I did not enjoy the work at all. Not to mention, I was the only junior media planner that was on 2 accounts. So I have 2 bosses at this point, and they're both pulling for my time.
This sounds like a healthy recipe for success.
And as a person, so like, remove
not working in the creative environment you want, and then stretching yourself super
so
thin.
thin.
Yeah.
And little did I know, I didn't have the full self-awareness at that point to know that I'm such a person that can very easily fall prey to the expectations of other people. So for me, who's a super sensitive person and is always trying to meet the expectations of others, you can imagine with 2 people pulling at my time and having expectations on me, I basically thought I was failing all the time. Which, come to find out, when I quit, I was not. I was doing a great job. That's why they gave me 2 accounts, but it was just too much. So at that same time, you and I were dating long distance. So this had something to do with it as well. And it just became clear to me that you were doing this super creative, really interesting thing. And I was going to this job that I hated every day, and we were not living in the same place.
When was this? 2010?
This was 2010.
Okay.
And I was miserable. And I remember my mom coming to visit, and I was like, Mom, I think I need to quit this job. And my mom, God love her, because she has always supported me in whatever I do. But she is, of course, of the older generation's mindset where she's like, honey, I know that you don't like it, but you have to be here a year. Like, you can't put it on your resume if you're here less than a year. And so I had this voice of my mom, who I really respected, in my ear. And I had this idea of people judging me and saying I couldn't hack it. I mean, for someone who was a super overachiever, the idea of quitting my first job like 5-6 months in was...
I remember talking to you about it multiple times.
It was
and
terrifying.
You were like, how can I ever get another job if people know that I only worked here for 6 months? They're going to think I'm a flake. And I'm like, I think you're reading too much into this. And it's funny to think back on like those thoughts that I had then and like where we are now.
Yeah.
And just how self-aware you are about like overthinking things nowadays.
Yeah.
So
I was terrified. I didn't know how to quit. Like, I just didn't know. To complicate things even further, basically the head of my department, who had given me the job, the day that I interviewed for the position, he was like my final interview. So it was like a group interview. So you meet like 5 or 6 people or whatever. And so he's my final interview. And earlier that day, I had gotten a job offer from another interview that I'd had in Atlanta. And they offered me super lowball. They were like, oh, come live in Atlanta and make $22,000 a year. And I was like, that's like borderline.
Talking to you about this.
Like,
yeah.
I went to a 4-year college. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't live on that, you know?
Yeah.
And, but I
have a friend who's spending more than that a year on mochas and coffee cakes. Like, come on, guys.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm meeting with the head guy, and he goes, okay, well, we'll let you know next week. We're interviewing a couple more candidates, so we'll let you know. And this was one of my very first, like, I'm an adult now and I have to like be assertive. And I said, I have to be really honest with you. This is my top choice. I want to work at this agency. I have this other job offer that I just got, and they need me to tell them by today. I would rather work here than there, but this is just what's on the table. And I don't know if it's helpful for anyone out there listening, but that was my first like, hey, just tell the truth. It's not that scary.
Yeah.
I was afraid he was going to think I was like trying to play games or whatever, but I just said, I'm not trying to play games. Like, this is the truth. He decided to hire me. They canceled the rest of their interviews. So here I am 5 months later, and this guy basically took a risk on me. But what you realize, and what I know now with more time removed, is that this is business.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
And that has probably happened to that guy 100 times over with people.
Yeah.
And everyone has different desires, and everybody's going to come and go and quit. It felt like I had personally offended somebody. But anyway, so it was terrifying for me. But once I made that mental switch of like, I need to do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't be at a job that I hate.
Now, we should also let everybody know at home that thought probably came along with the crying after work.
Every day.
Yeah. So that's where I think you went from a whisper to like things need to change.
Well, I always say that.
And I don't bring this up because I want everyone to know that like you cried at the end of the work. I bring it up
happy
to like
to talk about how much I cry. Happy to cry right now if you need me to.
Miserable this job was for you.
Yes. So I always say that, you know, there are some people I think that can be really unhappy in something like a job, and they can just compartmentalize and suppress it or whatever. And kind of my gift and my curse is being a super sensitive person. So if I hate something, my whole body hates it. I will cry. Like when I hated the job at the agency, every day I would drive home on the commute, and I would go home and I would just cry. And it was just because I just in my heart knew that it wasn't the right thing for me, and basically wasting these days at this thing that wasn't right. Just my whole being was like, this is not okay. And so I think that's what pushed me over the edge. Like, if I'm being honest, it wasn't even like the opportunity or the this or that. It was just like, I can't keep living like this kind of thing. But like Jason said, I wasn't prepared to just jump off the deep end without having a safety net. So I started reaching out to people that I knew, connections that I had back in Jacksonville.
And I think that was the point at that time was you had taken this risk of sorts to go work in this agency in a place you'd never lived. You had this whole new life, and then I was such a draw that, and you had your family in Jacksonville, you missed your family, and it was kind of like, I think I just want to come back to Jacksonville. I think our relationship, we were trying to
worth it.
really, well, and we were really trying to make it work, and I think we realized long distance wasn't going to be a good long-term thing, and I sure enough wasn't moving.
That was another thing. Sorry, I didn't laugh at that. Anyway.
That's okay.
That was another thing is I had all these stories in my head too about like, are people going to think that I'm moving back to Jacksonville just for Jason? Which if I was honest with myself, definitely was a huge factor in it. But people were like, oh, what if it doesn't work out? Like, and you threw away this, you know, this career that you could have had in advertising. And I think for anyone who has found themselves in that situation where it's like this relationship over career or whatever, sometimes that can be a real hard decision to make. And for me, it was knowing that even if I moved back to Jacksonville and it didn't work out with us, I would be okay.
Right.
So it wasn't like I was putting all my eggs in this
You
one
could be my
basket.
barista. Like, I would support you. This is where I'm just going to stay this entire episode.
No, not if we broke up. That would be so weird.
That'd be fine. Just don't spit in my drink.
I would. No, but that was the thing is I asked myself, I said, okay, if for some reason I went like kind of all in on this and it didn't work out, would I be okay? And the answer was yes. And so then I was like, okay, then I can do this. And so I did find a job at an agency in Jacksonville. And I think they did ask me a question about why I was leaving so soon.
And when you were looking for this job, do you remember, were you just emailing people or was it when you...
I was emailing people.
Yeah.
It was connections that I had in Jacksonville. I actually remember exactly who it was. It was Gina Starr from Jacksonville. I had connected with her via social media because she had kind of been in your circles from doing stuff in Jacksonville. And so we had a little bit of context. I emailed her. I reached out to her. I said, do you know of any positions? She said, actually, I just heard this position's opened up. It's not even on job boards yet. Yada, yada. Resume gets passed along, did a phone interview. And then I did an in-person interview when I
came and visited
you. It went really well. And the position was actually for a social media manager. And so I felt like at least, and it was this new department they were creating. So I thought at least this will give me more creativity because it's not this old institutionalized kind of department. And I did that for a year. And so I did quit. And I still remember the day that I quit. And I've never felt so sick to my stomach in my whole life.
Yeah.
I think I'm not super proud to admit this, but I'm happy to admit it now. I think I might have even made up like a white lie about like a family member who needed my help. I don't remember.
Stop it.
Like can't be sure I didn't
confirm or
use
deny.
that. Yeah. But that was how like just not confident I was at the time in standing in my truth and being like, hey, this is a better choice for me. And I was so desperately afraid of letting people down, but hey, you do what you gotta do.
Do you remember the feeling? Because I distinctly remember the feeling of like, you make the decision to take this big risk, you then take the risk and quitting your good job and then moving on to this next one. And do you remember the final, like the feeling of relief after that? So you go through this, like, this is so uncomfortable. I don't know if I made the right decision. Did I do everything wrong? And then for me, there was just a turning point where I realized, oh my gosh, like I just feel so much better. Like I don't feel like I'm so bogged down. Like I don't feel like I'm in this beige cloud anymore for me personally.
For me, it was the instant that I told my boss that I was quitting. The instant.
So you had all the uncomfortable lead up time where you just felt sick to your stomach. And then as soon as you told your boss,
it felt like such a huge burden off my shoulders. And it was one of those things where it's like, I don't even care what the next thing is. I don't even care how that turns out. It's just, I was to the point with that current state that I couldn't take another step. You know, I just knew it was so wrong for me. So sometimes you don't know if the next thing is right. You just know that this thing is wrong. And that was the case for me. So that's why I think ours are like a little bit different. But that was the case with that. And then the second that I packed up all my stuff and like, I think we did the thing where I was like, oh, it was near the holidays at the time. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't have a lot of stuff. And so you were like, you can stay with me over the holidays and then we'll look for an apartment, you know, come beginning of the year. And then we've been living together ever since.
Well, I mean, I also moved you in a U-Haul and drove a U-Haul like 8 hours. A rickety U-Haul that didn't have AC.
It was scary.
It was a terrible U-Haul.
We drove that whole way not even talking to each other. We were in different vehicles.
No, I think we just talked on the phone. I think we literally this is like back when you still wanted to make phone calls. I know, we were so cute.
How cute
We probably
that?
listened to songs and stuff.
Yeah, also 100% of the time where I was at that agency job, I was just talking to you on Skype chat.
You know what? I bet you I know what we did because I had gone on long road trips with my family and we used walkie-talkies instead of the phone. I bet you I purchased walkie-talkies.
I do remember walkie-talkies.
Yeah, because that would have been like a very me thing to do. I know.
That's way cuter.
Love you.
Did we have like cool call signs?
Probably. I imagine we had a
don't
lot of things in 8 hours to keep us going.
That was my big first risk. But the other one I want to bring up was a year after that, where I ended up leaving that social media job to come work for you.
You're a real 9 to 5 quitter.
Once I got that first taste of quitting, Like, I want to quit everything. No, I did stay there for almost a year, I think. And fun fact about that. The day I was going to go tell my boss that I was quitting, we had a staff meeting and I was named Employee of the Month.
Yeah, you were.
And I was like,
yeah, you were.
I'll wait till Monday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I quit the Monday after I was named Employee of the Month. And I'm pretty sure it was because they could tell that I was like fed up and they were like, let's just see if this will help. No, both of those jobs were great places to work, just not for me. So that's the thing. You have to do what's right for you. And the reason I bring up the second risk was because that wasn't just like moving cities and quitting and doing all of that. That was, I am no longer getting a paycheck from a company anymore. I have to go out and get my own insurance. That for some reason was the scariest thing to me.
I remember this conversation.
Like no benefits. Like you have to just go. Because I felt like I was just finally getting the hang of what it meant to be an adult, which was like you get this paycheck and it's deposited in your bank account and you manage your bill pay and you pay for health or it's
kind of funny when you actually think about
insurance.
it. Like working for a 9 to 5 is way less of being an adult than working for yourself. Because it's like, here's the insurance you sign up for. Here's the 401k you sign up for.
It's like paid by numbers.
Here's the taxes you're going to want to deduct. And like, you want to direct deposit it? We can do all that for you. Whereas working for yourself, you're like the wild, wild west.
But that's what I mean. So I had this like kind of idea of what adulthood was. And I thought that was all really scary. And then it was like, oh no, here's not
real,
even paid by numbers anymore. It's like
entrepreneurial adulthood.
So that was really scary. But once I went and got my own health plan and I was like, that wasn't so hard. That was just like a thing that I had to do and I did it and it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to talk about this next risk that you took. It's kind of a risk we both took because at the time we were living together, not working together. So I was doing my I Wear Your Shirt thing. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, I wore t-shirts for a living for 5 years from 2009 to 2013. And every single day I put on a different shirt, filmed a video, recorded a live video show, took photos, was active on social media, which I just mean I like posted the photos and things. Yeah, said hello to people, and it was quite a weird thing to be doing on a daily basis. In so much as to say our days were very different.
Yes.
So we would wake up, I would probably wake up earlier than you. I would start by taking my like photo of the day and do all that stuff. And a lot of times I would be getting ready to film a video early because I had to film, edit, and upload a video every single day. And it would take like 8 hours. So I do remember distinctly one day where I was but I was wearing a shirt for a Halloween costume company, but I was dressing up in the lion costume that they gave me. And I wanted to take it one step further. Like it was a full lion outfit, except for the face, but I wanted the face to really be locked in. And so you did my face makeup for this lion.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like the most creative thing that I did, even including anything I did at my job.
And then you were like, okay, I'm going to finish doing your face makeup as an adult who's an adult man who probably shouldn't be wearing face makeup. I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to go to my job.
Yeah. I can also remember a similar experience where like right at the foot of the stairs, you remember you had that wicker mirror.
Yeah. That's, I believe, where we did the lion makeup.
Yeah, and before I went out the front door to go get in my car to go to work, and this was a different day, and you were wearing a woman's dress.
Yeah.
And you had purchased like 99-cent the reddest lipstick that you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
At like CVS or something, and you're like, can you just help me apply my lipstick before you go? I have to film this video. And I'm like, do this. And I'm like doing your lipstick.
I just didn't know what to do with my mouth.
And then you turned around and we both looked in the mirror and I was like, what is my life right now? And
do you remember that color of red, what I called it?
SOS red.
Call for help. That's what I called the color. So anyway, we had these very different lives work-wise, but we lived together. We were making our relationship work. And I remember when things started to get really busy for me. And so this was end of 2010 to 2011 when my I Wear Your Shirt business went from managing one company per day to 5 companies per day, and then also having employees to manage, and went from 2 people to then 7 people. And it was at these moments where you would come home, and in the morning it was all like, okay, I'm excited to start this day. But by the end of your workday, when you got home, I had done so much stuff, managing people, doing all these things, hosting a live show. I mean, I was just dead tired, exhausted, and I still had more work to do.
And you were still working. Yeah, that was really hard.
Yeah, and I think you started to see the writing was on the wall of like, okay, I don't love this new job. I'm working in a dungeon, a dark dungeon, and there's a skylight that I can sit under, but that's it. you didn't love the clients that you were working with, and we don't have to name them because I don't even want their name on this show.
I didn't love the commute. It was
the commute was really rough
both ways.
Yeah. And you came home and you saw just how like drained and just, tired I was every single day. And so there became this moment in our relationship where I think you saw an ability or an opportunity to help me. And I was really worried because I was like, first of all, I don't know where the money's going to come from to pay you to leave your job. But second, like, how is this going to affect our relationship? Like that to me was a huge risk of, we just navigated long distance, figuring that out, and then finally getting in kind of a little bit of a groove in our lives. And now we were going to work next to each other and you were going to work for me. And what was that going to be like? And that felt really scary.
Yeah. And truthfully, for me, what it was it was my first taste. This is another, going back to the thing of like test drive the thing or whatever. That was like my way of test driving being an entrepreneur, because I got to sort of experience it through your eyes. And I, as tired as you were and as like overworked as you were, I saw the amazing power of being able to create something and doing it 100% for yourself. And I was like pretty jealous of that. And so I found myself coming home from work, and if you had to work, I would help you film videos, or I would help you brainstorm ideas or things like that. And I felt, the other big thing was like, I felt like I made an impact. So when I went to work, a lot of times I just felt like I was like in a system, and like I didn't 100% feel like my ideas were being translated to, progress or movement or things that were happening. Whereas I could tell you some ideas and then you could go and do them. And it just was this amazing thing of like, I actually have power here. And as a person who's 1 or 2 years out of college, rarely do you feel like you have any power at a job. You're just sort of a hired hand,
Yeah.
And so I sort of got very like lured in by that feeling of entrepreneurship of like, yes, it's 100% up to you, but it's also 100% up to you. And so, yeah, the idea started percolating in my head. The way that I remember it is that I wasn't that worried about us working together.
Yeah, I don't think I was maybe outwardly worried about it, but I definitely was internally worried about it because, I mean, truthfully, our relationship up until that point, like we'd had a couple little bumps in the road of me dealing with not being very emotional and you needing more emotional openness, which we'll dig into another. Let's not talk about it now. No, but I actually do want to talk about that in a separate episode. But, so it just felt like we had done a lot of work. I didn't want to ruin it by presenting us with a huge other obstacle. Yeah. And really, I think the financial side of it was a big worry for me as well, because at that time I was already spending $25,000 a month just on salaries alone.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, like the most I can probably pay you is $3,000 a month or less than that. I think it was actually less than that.
It was, because it was less than I remember distinctly, because my first salary out of college was like something like 35. My next job was like 32. And then you were like, I can't even pay you that. And so all my friends were like, I just got a promotion, like another 10 grand a year and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm going in the wrong direction.
The good thing was though, you went lower in salary, but way up on Jason time.
I was going to say way lower on cost of living.
Well, that too. Yeah.
You weren't charging me rent, but anyway, nice of you. Very nice of you.
Yeah, I know. What can I say?
But so, yeah, and for me, it was also a little bit of the same thing I talked about before, which is like, if it doesn't work out, we'll be okay. Like, just tell me it's not working out and then I'll go get a different job. That's really the approach I had. So I think, again, for anybody out there who's trying to navigate some type of big risk, just telling yourself like, if I want to try this thing, but what's my plan if it doesn't work out? And then I think that so much of that can help you finally take that risk, because I'll be okay on the other side of it. You know what I mean? So as you and I were navigating that, tell them that how we ended up working together.
Yeah. So I think we just had multiple conversations. Like you would come home from work and I had a whole bunch of stuff. And I think you actually started helping me with things. So like you started getting me organized with some processes. I think that was like one of the first forays into, you were more process oriented, even though I seemed like the more analytical one. You had more of a kind of
like, we got to get these clients into a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And so you started helping out with some of that stuff, which was really good. And then even just like organizing stuff and like helping like set up and break down and like do all those things, that was
doing the t-shirt, like the logos on the t-shirt.
Yes. Doing those things. And I think for me, it just became one of those things where I realized how much help you could be in this, and that I had only done it myself on my own for the previous 2 years plus. And I was like, wow, like someone else can help take just like a little bit of weight off my shoulders. This is gonna be amazing. And so I don't remember the exact details of how it happened, but here's my recollection, and
Go
then
ahead.
you can, was that I remember just having a conversation with you, and I remember you bringing it to me going, you need to hire me. Here are the things that I can help you with. Like, you're too stressed out. You have too much on your plate. Like, let's make this happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I remembered it.
Similarly, you had our
Did your story involve a knife?
yeah.
You're gonna
You
hire
hired
me.
me. You hired me at knife point.
Yeah.
No,
We don't advocate violence around here. by
We
the
do
way.
not. You were already thinking of hiring an assistant. I think it had become clear to you that you needed.
And I had someone who I
did.
had
You had
hired
part-time.
for that.
Yes.
And they had actually turned from that into more of a operations role. So like managing all the other people and helping facilitate that. But I did need someone to like help with emails, help with other things, help with just
Yeah.
all the odds and ends.
And you were talking about that, and I had already planted this seed in my head where I was like, I'm over this other job. I'm gonna do this. So yeah, I pitched myself to you, and I was like, you're not gonna hire anybody else. You're gonna hire me because you can get me for way cheaper, and I'll work more hours because we live in the same place. And it may not work out, but if it doesn't work out, then I'll just go get a different job. But I think it's gonna work out. It's gonna be great. And you were like, okay. And that was that. And I quit my job. And
I mean, I didn't have a plan for how to pay you. I mean, maybe there was like a month or two of salary, and I don't even remember if we had that specific conversation. But I do remember at the time there was one big client, and I think it was Citrix at the time. But like I was waiting on a bigger deal with them to come through, and that deal alone would cover your salary for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And that deal actually did come through, which was like really good timing.
yeah, and looking back, it's really funny because I'm realizing now that even from those like very early days, I feel like we approached everything sort of as a team.
Oh, yeah. So let's
know?
talk about that for a second. I mean, I don't necessarily know if this is going to help the people at home who are listening to this, but when you and I kind of started working together, and then I officially hired you on because you made me an offer I couldn't refuse, I never looked at it as like CEO and worker or like boss and assistant. I never saw it that way. And I just saw it as you have been so instrumental in coming up with creative ideas for Our Rear Shirt, for helping me stay sane, for helping film videos. Like, it was very much a collaborative effort. And you know, you weren't a partner in the company in any way, but that's how I looked at you on paper, I should say. And I looked at it that way. And so, you know, I think that was a really good way for us to work together and not feel, especially any hit on our relationship of like, okay, now we have to turn off CEO Jason and we have to become like boyfriend Jason at the time.
Yeah, the interesting caveat to that though is I very distinctly remember in my own mind making a little bit of a nuanced choice there to be like, yes, we're going to treat each other as equals and we're going to like not disrespect each other. You're not going to like be like, oh, can you run next door and get me coffee type thing. However,
even though a mocha and a coffee cake would have been nice.
right next door. We had a Starbucks right by our house.
We really did.
No, but I thought to myself, don't forget this is his company. And so I had to make peace with the fact of we're actually not partners here. Like, this is your business. This is something that you started. This is your idea. And just being able to make that subtle distinction in my mind, I feel like helped us not butt heads as much as we probably could, because it wasn't me coming in and being like, I have all these ideas about like where we're going to take this company, whatever. I just was very careful to sort of let you lead, but make sure that my opinion was heard and everything like that. But I do think that sometimes that can cause friction is when suddenly a new partner arrives and you know, that could lead you to feel threatened or you to feel confused or whatever. And so it's funny, like we definitely from a respect perspective,
Ooh, nice.
From that perspective, we definitely had like mutual respect, but it was very conscious on my part to make sure that if it was a 51-49 situation, you had the 51 because it was your business.
Yeah. And I think that's just a really important point if you're maybe not in the 9-to-5 journey looking to leave that, but maybe you're in a place where you want to start a business with a friend, or maybe you are at a 9-to-5 and you want to go work for a small startup or what have you, is that you just know what your role is going to be and that you and the person you're going to work for are crystal clear. Because in the normal 9-to-5, like go to work mode, everyone gets it. There's a hierarchy. There's an org chart. You have a boss. You have people who are on your like. It's very clear.
Different than an orc chart.
Very different than an orc chart, which in Lord of the Rings is important, so you know which orcs you can kind of match up with. What I was going to say, though, is in a startup environment, I think more established startups, there's still the org chart and all that stuff. But in like a working for or with a friend, there's not necessarily those roles. And it can also feel weird. I think a lot of us don't want to call ourselves CEO. Like I never called myself CEO.
Yeah.
If anything, it was always chief t-shirt wearer. Right. That was it. But if you can figure out, where you think you fit and then have that conversation with the person you're going to work with, that can just, jump any hurdles that might happen way in advance. So you never have to run into issues of like, this is my company and having those conversations.
Not to mention, like, I'm sure part of my decision to do that was because I was brand new. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I didn't want all of the pressure to be complete equals in that scenario. Like you had been running your own business for many more years than I had. So I was content to kind of be a more supportive role. And I think some people are that way. They want to be the number two, not the number one, because the number one has all the pressure. So I think, like you said, just, we were very vocal about those types of dynamics. We talked about it a lot. As much as we tried to keep our relationship separate, we were very naive, I think, to think that we were going to be like work Jason and Carol during the day and then like relationship Jason and Carol at night. And then you figure out very quickly it just all blends together.
Yeah, and
which can be a good thing.
I think we have a full other episode in us about what it takes to work as a husband and wife duo or a boyfriend and girlfriend duo.
Partner and partner.
Partner and partner duo as well. Thank you. And so we'll get to that. But I wanted to talk about, I think we've kind of covered the most of this. If you want to maybe just move to our big move, our big life move.
Our big move. Okay, so we've talked mostly about jobs and taking big risks up to this point. But I think another great example of taking a big risk is making a huge
life move.
Like geography-wise. And so for us, we had lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I am from Jacksonville, Florida originally. That's where I was born. And so I did my little stint in North Carolina, but then I came back. So pretty much a lifer in Jacksonville. And Jason owned a home there. So when I moved in with him, up to that point, I think we had lived there for 5 years. About.
Yeah, I mean, I'd lived in Jacksonville from 2000. So at that point, it was
15 years.
Yeah, 12, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah,
it ended up being 15 by the end of it. But it was interesting because I remember specifically we were driving somewhere at some point and we'd been dating for a while. And you were like, do you see yourself living in Florida forever? And I just was so cut and dry, like, I'm going to live here forever. And for all intents and purposes, it is a really nice town, Ponte Vedra Beach, where we used to live. The ocean is fantastic. It's a very affluent area, so there's no crime you have to worry about at all. But in my mind, I had moved around a lot as a kid to all these different areas, and I just thought like Florida was the place I wanted to live forever.
You loved the heat.
Yeah, and I loved it. And I just think at that time in my life, I just couldn't think of anything else.
Both of our families lived there completely. So yeah, it seemed
And I don't even
great.
know that you necessarily thought like, I want to live somewhere else. It was just more, do you see yourself living anywhere else, or do you just see yourself living here?
I actually remember it was our first date. That's why I asked. 'Cause I'm like,
oh wow, first date.
Yeah, I was like, we should probably be on the same page with this stuff, like before we get in too deep. And I was like, so do you want to live here the rest of your life? Like, what's your deal? And you were like, yes, yeah, I want to live in Ponte Vedra for the rest of my life. And I was like, okay, I can get down with that. Like, my whole family's here. Like, all right.
Give myself a little credit. This was like 24, 25-year-old Jason. He was naive.
He's so naive.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so weird. No,
26,
you were 27.
26.
You were 27 when we met. Sorry.
35. I'm 52 now. How old am I?
Okay, so where did the whisper get planted for us to move? Do you remember?
I really don't.
It had to have been before Misfit, because that's when we like really decided San Diego.
Yeah, I think some of the things that started happening were, number one, we lived in this house that I had purchased, and I had purchased it with the assumption that in 2008, ding, 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 when I decided to buy it, that it was going to be a great investment. Now, unfortunately, I bought it right before the economy. Cool. Right before the economy collapsed. So I literally paid top dollar for this house, and it was $318,000 at the time. And I really really blame the real estate agent that sold me on this house. That guy, I still am angry at that guy to this day.
Okay,
I
we
played
can
him in
talk about it
basketball
later.
and I've taken it out on him a little bit. Yeah.
You took it to
I
him?
absolutely have. But I kind of felt a little bit like we were trapped. And, you know, you had brought this like creative and visual and fun to the house where I had just really no taste at all for anything.
Well, and you were in work mode for so long. You were in
Right.
I wear your shirt grind mode. So I don't think you even wanted to think about any other factors or life things. Like you were just so busy trying to get the business going that I don't think you had time to think about it.
Yeah, and so I think what naturally happened was we started to both do as much as we could with this home that we lived in, and we worked from our home. So we spent all of our time there, and it just never felt great. And so I really felt trapped by the mortgage because none of the houses were selling in our neighborhood. No one was putting their house up for sale. And so after owning that house for like 5 or 6 years at that time, I just wasn't sure what we could do, but it just really felt like, you know what? This is not the place I want to be spending any more time. Like it just finally had run its course.
I'm realizing now that also the timing of it was, so we had gone to at least one Misfit conference before. And
So Misfit Conference, for those of you who don't know, which is probably everybody, was a small conference in Fargo, North Dakota. We first went to it in 2013.
run by our friends AJ and Melissa Leon.
And it was a very handcrafted event. I think the first year there were maybe 100 people there at most. And it was in this little yoga art studio that they set up, and it didn't look like a yoga or an art studio. And they brought in furniture from around the town and just had all this like crazy
Handcrafted food
Yeah,
and
it
name
was
tags made of like embossed wood.
Yeah, like actual
And-
laser engraved wood.
And the people there, I mean, you had speakers from all over, everything from like people who ran a Shakespeare company to spoken word poets to violinists to business people. And it was just this incredible, incredible experience. And what we, I think, took away the most was meeting people who had, I would say, this common thread of intentional living. So really wanting to design their own lives based on whatever their values are. And that's something, as most of you know that have listened to the show or checked out Wandering Aimfully, that's now something that we carry through in every aspect of our lives. And that was where that seed was really planted. And so I think we came back from that conference. And so you go to this conference in Fargo, North Dakota, and you're hanging out with people, and you're at this like art gallery, and your horizons are literally expanding before your eyes. And then you come back to this house in Florida that suddenly, by comparison, just feels like you said confined.
Yeah.
It was like we suddenly could see the world beyond our own little bubble. And we were like, we want to go check that out.
So also what happened at Fargo
Yeah.
was talking with other people who were like, where are you from? You're like, oh, Jacksonville, Florida. I'm like, what? Where is that? And then other people being like, oh, I'm from here, but I'm thinking about moving somewhere. And we were like, thinking about moving? What do you mean thinking about moving?
What do you mean moving?
And so I think that first year it was the whisper, like
Yeah.
very quiet whisper
Right.
though. But we were very much unhappy with our living situation home wise at that time.
And a lot of people who were nomads, like AJ and Melissa,
Right.
are literal nomads. They don't really have a home base. They live all over the world and going, whoa, like this is
Yeah.
a lifestyle. And
Yeah,
and-
we definitely couldn't have lived all over the world because we had our fur child Plaxico.
right, but like just
But
that
we could,
idea.
right? Like we could live from somewhere else. We could work from somewhere else, and we could live somewhere else. And that wasn't something that really had crossed my mind too
No,
much.
and I remember AJ and Melissa specifically said that the reason they had the conference in Fargo is because they found this town on some of their travels, and Fargo was so cool. And we were like, how many other cool places exist out there that we haven't even thought about?
Right. And yeah, so I think what really happened is between that first year of Misfit to the second year, well, a lot of things happened. So I shut down the I Wear Your Shirt business. It ended up just running itself into the ground and running us into the ground financially, and started making some bigger changes personally and just opening up about a lot of the stuff that had gone on. And then I had to let you go. You know, your salary was too much. I paid you too much. And you decided to start your own business
Yeah.
once you got that entrepreneurial itch, which was Made Vibrant.
Yes, which truthfully, was less, let me start my own business, and more, let me do anything possible to not go back to a real job.
Yeah. And so we were both kind of in this weird, murky area. You had a direction you were going in. I had no direction I was going in. Luckily, I think I still had some public speaking stuff, and then was just taking on some random video production stuff here and there. And I had started dabbling in the online course world. And so that was floating a lot of our revenue because we certainly didn't have any savings.
Not at all.
But between that first year, so quit I Wear Your Shirt after the first Misfit, you started Made Vibrant. The next Misfit, I think we were like ready for a big change. Like you had this new company you were building.
Yep.
I kind of had some semblance of stuff that I was doing, but I think we both knew like we wanted a fresh start. We wanted something different. We had been doing that in our work lives. Now we wanted that in our live lives.
Live lives.
And so I remember having breakfast one morning with Clay and Julia and Cece Chapman at the little hotel, and just kind of joking around with Clay and Julia. And they were like, we're thinking about moving. We live in New York right now, but it's really expensive and we don't really love it anymore. And we're thinking about like Portland or Austin or San Diego. And we were like, we're thinking about Portland or Austin or San Diego. And I think I blurted out or Julia blurted out.
It was definitely you two.
Yeah.
You and Julia.
Both of us, I'm not sure which order it was. We were like, let's just get a place together in San Diego or something. And we all kind of stared at each other, and Cece was like, he was definitely talking with us. He was kind of that way. He was like, should I just like back away? This is kind of weird. I'm not going to move with you guys. I have a whole family that I live with. And that really was the spark that kind of set us forward. And I think quickly after that, we started looking at places to rent. We decided San Diego purely for the weather because we just didn't want to take a chance on more heat in Austin. Yep. And then, Portland sounded awesome, but, we really liked the nice weather.
Yeah. And it took us about, I can't remember exactly how long, 6 to 9 months, like from that first initial thing we did 2 trips out to San Diego with Clay and Julia I
think the first trip was actually 2 months after that because it was in the summer. I remember it was in like July.
Yep.
And that was the first where we were like, we want to test the waters, which goes back to kind of a little bit of even our work transitions and our work risks was how can we dip our toes in this and make sure that we're not just leaping headfirst into something and may end up in a really bad position.
Yeah.
And so that was, let's go hang out with these people in like a very close quarter environment, the same home, and see what that's like, because if it doesn't go well, it's not going to go well living together.
Right.
So we did that. That worked out well.
Yep. And we looked at neighborhoods, like where we would all like to live, and kind of narrowed down what we'd all want in a place. And so, the ball just kept moving. And I'm realizing now that that's very much due to you, that you just are the person
I'm like a steamroller.
You take the next step. You take the next step. And I think so many times, people go, oh, I want to make this change in my life or whatever. And all they do is think about it. They don't ever do an action. And I think what you're really good at is every time we either talked with Clay and Julia or every time you and I had a conversation, you took the next step.
Yeah.
So it was, oh, I'm going to spend an hour and look at places in San Diego, or, oh, I'm going to price out, how would we get rid of our mortgage, or could we have renters, or like whatever those next steps are. So that's a good takeaway for people too. Like if you just feel like you have this idea for this big risk that you want to take, but you can't seem to make any progress on it, every time you think about it, come away with one tiny action that you can take that'll get you closer. Yeah.
And so for us, that just was like, let's not try and do everything up front. We're not moving tomorrow. Let's figure out what would it look like to, rent our home or sell our home, as you talked about. And I think we actually started that process too, is that we were like, well, let's start seeing if we can sell our house, because if we can sell our house, then I'm going to make all this money back that I invested into this home, which, spoiler alert, I didn't. And we, make it much easier. And it was kind of interesting. Like nothing became easy in that process. And it was not the perfect time for us to move. We did not have a cushion of money. At the time we were
still in debt.
$124,000 in debt. I don't think Made Vibrant at that time yet was making consistent money. I think you had like 1 or 2 clients at that point, which were good money, but it wasn't consistent. And my income certainly wasn't consistent. And it was all these things that were pointing like a house we probably couldn't sell, income was in flux, we had all this debt, we didn't really know these people, we'd never lived in San Diego. I mean, I grew up in San Diego for like a couple of years, but I don't remember it at all. I was little.
Like all signs point to
don't do this, stay where you are, stay in your comfort zone. And we just decided. Well,
I would say, so that's all the practical stuff. But I feel like if that spark is big enough, like if that whisper has now become, a strong enough voice, then you know you have to do it. And like you will figure it out. But it's like we think that all the logistics are the important parts, but really it's that nagging feeling that you have. That's the real important part, because that won't go away. And if anything, it will just become more and more a source of dissatisfaction the longer you wait to make that change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like we think of all of these line items as things that are the real things to pay attention to, but really the thing to pay attention to is the whisper that is now becoming a louder voice.
It's basically the whisper becomes a lion's roar in your ear.
The lion that
yeah, that's what I took it back to. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that kind of fast forwarded us to, we started looking at places. We found a place that we really, really liked and that was really cool. I don't even remember how I initially found the place that we decided to move into. I just remember finding the photography, and there was a geodesic greenhouse.
I think you found it on Zillow, and it was poorly decorated, so you just thought, this isn't for us. Clay found the video and sent it to you and was like, this place looks incredible. And we were like, the video is very different from the pictures.
Yeah.
And you said, oh, I think I did look at this place. Got in touch with the real estate agent over here. We flew out there to look at it. He showed us the place. We fell in love. We were like, please, we want this place.
Well, I remember when we were in the driveway, we had just looked at it and another car pulled up.
Yeah.
And we had talked to them when we were leaving. We were like, we really like it. And like, we really liked it because the way that it was set up was awesome. It was 2 separate wings. So it was perfect for us, like a central living and dining. And it was super open and modern. And it was just really nice. And like the pool, the water slide, the zip line. I mean, I'm describing this house. It should sound like a fun zone. It was a fun zone. And yeah, I mean, I remember at that point we were so ready and so committed to do this, but yet still everything wasn't ironed out. Still didn't have a thing to do with the house. Didn't come with Stone Flex, still had debt. And I think we just decided that we wanted this thing, and you say this all the time, more than we fear the reality that it took to get it.
Right.
So we were going to have to do something with the house, get renters or something, because I couldn't afford the mortgage and rent. We were going to have to figure out, what do we do with all of our stuff? Do we sell it? Do we move it?
Spoiler alert, we sold it.
Spoiler alert, we sold it. You know, is it going to be good living with these people? Like, we have no idea. But all these things, we wanted it more. We wanted that change.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that really set us over the edge before we made the final commitment was, it was kind of going back to that first feeling I had when I quit my 9-to-5 job to start my first company, which was, now is the perfect time to do this. We don't have kids. Sure, we have debt. Sure, we have these things. But you know what? Like, worst case scenario, we could move out there, get rid of all of our stuff. It could be terrible, and we could move back into one of our parents' houses.
Yep.
Like, that's the worst case scenario.
Which goes back to my whole thing about, like, know that you're going to be okay if it doesn't work out. And then that can help bolster your courage to go do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we did it. And I ended up finding a property management company that rented our house. And we actually made like a little bit of a profit every month on that, which was kind of nice.
Yep.
They dealt with all the logistics, which was amazing. And we, business stuff got going, and it was really fun. Like, this whole new change for us, there was just one theme, which was adventure.
Yep.
And that was just super powerful and continued to be really powerful. And I think really sparked us forward into like the position that we're in right now.
Well, that was another thing that I wanted to bring up is, funny enough, because of all of these things that were pointing to us saying this was a bad time to do this, we were in debt and all this stuff. That first year that we were in that house, we got out of debt. Yeah. And I chalked that up to, like,
now, granted, we'd been working on it before that.
Yes. But I mean, we first of all, my business especially, like I said, tripled in revenue. So I think that when we finally made space and took that, like, I think it just speaks to how, like I said, how powerful that feeling is inside, that when you want the change, because finally when we listened to it and we actually did it, it fueled so many different aspects of our lives, like being able to jumpstart our businesses and grow them so that we could pay off our debt. And so all of these reasons, like, of, oh, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because there's all these reasons not to do this thing. But it's like, maybe doing the thing is going to actually give you the kickstart you need to actually pay off your debt or actually make the changes that you want. So that's something to think about. And then also I want to point out to people, when you are thinking about taking a big risk, think about ways that you can be creative about it. So people thought we were nuts to move in with another couple, but the truth is we would never have been able to get the place that we got had we decided to live by ourselves.
Yep.
And because our financial constraints were so, high at the time, because we weren't making a lot of money and all these things, we had to get creative, and we had to say, okay, we want to take this big risk, but maybe there's a way that we can do it that'll check some of those boxes, which is lowering our mortgage or, things like that. So yeah. I challenge people to, whatever that thing is that you might want to do, don't just picture it with the traditional mindset of there's only this one way that I can get it done. It's like, no, like there are all these different creative solutions that you might be able to come up with.
Yeah. And I'm sure, even like the guy who rented us his $2 million home because he later sold it while we were living there, like it's probably a risk to have these two couples move in and didn't want a dog, but ended up allowing a dog. And there's just all these little things that go along the way. And you just have to be willing to say, I'm going to stretch beyond my comfort zone. I'm going to ask for things that I probably wouldn't normally ask for. I'd be afraid to ask for. And you do have to have a little bit of probably like stars aligning along the way for things to happen. But you figure it out and you make it work. And, for us, I think that change moving from Florida to California was probably the in size of stepping stones. I think all the stepping stones before that were reasonably large. This was like, we both jumped as far as we could forward, and I think it has proved to just continue to give us like dividends and creative energy, and and like you said, it led to paying off debt. It led to coming up with Buy My Future, the idea in that house, which then became Buy Our Future, which then became Wandering Aimfully, which is what this entire thing is about, which is really cool. I strongly believe that would not have happened had we stayed in Florida. So yeah, I think, to kind of wrap this topic of how to take a big risks and our story of how we've taken risks over the years is really just to not be afraid of all the little things that you assume might happen, which is another thing that we naturally do as humans when it comes to risks, is we put all these roadblocks in front of us before they're actually real roadblocks in front of us. Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing that you realize. It gets so much easier for us now. Taking risks for us now, sure, it's still a lot of mental effort. It's still a lot of decision making. It's still tough, but it's so much easier now than it was in 2013 when we first decided to do this, or in 2007 or 2005. It just gets easier the more that you do it.
Yeah, and I think another big part of it too is asking yourself, you may not know what the next right thing is on the other side of that risk, but the only thing that you might know is that whatever you're doing right now isn't working. And sometimes that can be enough to push you forward to take that risk, because you just say, okay, there has to be something better than this.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of what I equate, like your beige existence thing and kind of my unhappiness at my job. Like, I don't know what's on the other side of this risk, but it has to be better than living this every day. And then I would also say, just knowing that if you are going to take that leap, having an idea in your head about, I will be okay if it doesn't work out, because at least I went for it, and it's going to lead me to a different little, side step, and just having a willingness to go wherever the flow of that is going to take you. I think that can sometimes help, like I said, bolster your courage.
Yeah. All right. Well, that, I believe, wraps up the topic for today's episode, but it does not wrap up our final segment here, because the show, Wandering Aimfully, the show, has a final segment, and it is called...
You're going to do the acronym,
No.
WGFI. No, it's called, we Googled that for you.
We Googled that for you. So every episode, we want to bring to you something that you may have thought about and gone, where does that come from? Or what does that mean? Or what is the origin of that? Or just what is that?
Or
maybe
why?
You've never heard of it.
Why does that do that?
And this week, this episode, I have the pleasure of bringing about the We Googled That For You topic. And what I would like to know from you...
Yes.
Caroline,
is... I'm so bad at coming up with stuff on the spot. Go.
Where do you think the origin of the phrase "in a nutshell" came from? So this is how we do this, if you haven't heard this before. Basically, the person who has we Googled that for you, I Googled this for Caroline, I present it to her, she gives us our best idea here.
It comes from a little-known 18th century colloquialism. Which refers to when people used to sit around the dinner table trading stories.
Now, were these people from a certain area or place?
Holland.
Okay, so they're Dutch.
Sit around the dinner table, Dutch dinner table. the
Dutch dinner table.
Dutch dinner table. Dutch oven on the table. It's not that
Oh, I see. I got it, yeah. Potty humor. We love potty humor around here.
They would trade stories, but only those that could fit on a piece of paper that could be crumpled up and fit inside a nutshell.
Wow.
A walnut shell.
I can't. Did you read it verbatim? Even the Dutch oven part's in here, which is interesting.
Did you tell them how the fun part of the segment is that the other person has to guess what it is? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're picking up that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the real one?
So it's not that.
Not that.
It's not that. In a nutshell means in a few words, a very brief form, which you know. And it is believed to have originated from the Roman writer Pliny. I believe it's Pliny, correct? Pliny. I believe it's Pliny. Who
Sure.
in 77 AD, so
Okay.
just a couple centuries off. 18 of them? 18
Said
centuries?
8th century is what I meant.
Still a couple centuries off, described a copy of Homer's Iliad. The book was so tiny that it could fit into the shell of a nut, which is obviously hyperbole because the Iliad is an incredibly long book, but it became a very popular phrase because it was so polar
Obvious.
opposite
Right.
that it was not that.
Not that.
But that is believed where the phrase originated from, and it's been
also-
used a couple times throughout history, but in the 1500s is when it was the first time it had been seen written multiple times and written and spoken.
What
word.
I like about that's interesting is that most people do use that phrase when they've probably been a little bit too long-winded and been
Right.
like,
Okay, in a nutshell. Yeah.
that's cool.
Which is how it works.
Like that.
So that is the thing that we Googled for you this week.
I would also like to point out that
Yeah.
I get partial credit because in my story, I said written word crumpled up inside the size of a nutshell. That feels related.
Let's go to the judges. Oh,
Yes.
no partial credit.
You're looking at the wrong judge. I'm looking at that judge.
Yeah, but that's the one you paid. That's not the one who actually.
Pay to play.
Yeah. So we Googled
Pay
that
to
for you.
play.
Hope you enjoy taking that
Hope you
little
enjoyed that little brain nugget.
that little nutshell to your friends. And yeah, that's it for this episode of Wandering Aimfully, the show.